Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Side event, raising awareness of the global impact of fraud. My name is Mark Shaw. I'm the director of the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. We have a very interesting and good lineup for you this morning. It's really also an honor for us to partner again with the Australian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, who is sponsoring the Side event. But importantly also, a number of other governments are supporting the event. I'll go through them. Canada, Indonesia, Japan, New Zealand, the Philippines, Thailand, the United Kingdom, and Vietnam. And we are very grateful for their support. And I think that represents the concern across a range of different countries around the issue that we are going to discuss this morning. Fraud and related cyber scam compounds have become, I think, one of the most alarming evolutions of transnational organized crime in recent years, with billions of US dollars defrauded annually. And I think that applies. Many of us have been victims, or at least been approached to be victims, or know people who are victims, or have family members who are victims. And I speak personally myself. And it's not just about the money lost. Cyber scam operations exemplify a convergence of various types of transnational organized crime: human trafficking, cyber crime, corruption, money laundering, and fraud, of course. And I think they are best understood in a package of issues that make up this very complex phenomenon that we are discussing. Over the past number of years, and indeed the GI has been working on this with our colleagues in Bangkok, we have observed the growth of cyber scam operations mushrooming in Southeast Asia and beyond, quickly evolving, adapting to new trends, responding to attempts to crack down, and developing in ways that are very, very rapid. I don't know if that was a cyber scam, but we're now being recorded. So today there's a long list of known locations which are operating in plain sight. And they can be found in border areas, in smaller villages, but also across the region's capitals. And I think it's important, and that's very true of our global work too, that this issue is not limited to Southeast Asia, and that cyber scam centers and operations come in many shapes and forms. And I think Lindsay's presentation will show that. Fraud factories, call centers, are popping up in different parts of the world, linked to fraudulent recruitment and this global expansion of fraud, which I mentioned at the beginning. And so this phenomena obviously requires both a regional, but more importantly, a global response. And no country can face the threat alone. So both this Side event, with all of the countries supporting it, but a range of other discussions going forward are important to respond. I think one thing which is important to say before I close my opening remarks is to highlight that cyber scam operations take place at the intersection of the criminal underworld and the upper world of business and politics. And we don't say that enough very often. And many scam operations are able to hide behind a facade of business that look legitimate, but that profit from an ecosystem of corruption and the protection of state-embedded actors. And in addition, global technology companies are regularly exploited by criminals for IT and communication infrastructure. And so the success of cyber scams is not only the result of criminal ingenuity, that's part of it, but it's the consequence of a systemic complicity, if you like, regulatory gaps, fragmented enforcement, and several other factors that I think will come up in our discussion. And that makes it important to address the issue here at the CCPCJ, at next year's UN Crime Congress. But there are also initiatives underway. The second Global Fraud Summit will be held in Vienna in March 2026 as a joint platform between UNODC and Interpol under the leadership of the UK. And my colleague Fran will say some more about that in her remarks. So there is movement, an important movement in the area to respond. I'll stop there and immediately hand over to Katie Mead, the Deputy Permanent Representative of the Australian Permanent Mission here in Vienna, for her opening remarks. Katie, once again, it's really a pleasure to cooperate with Australia on this important issue. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mark, and good morning, everybody. Thank you all very much for attending this event. It's a big room, but I think we have a very good turnout, and I know there's lots of people online, so welcome and thank you for coming. We're very pleased to co-sponsor this event. I know you've heard the countries before, but I'm going to say them again because they are a really great group: Canada, Indonesia, Japan, New Zealand, the Philippines, Thailand, the United Kingdom, and Vietnam, as well as the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime. The focus of today's discussion will be the rapidly evolving fraud phenomenon that has developed in Southeast Asia with the proliferation of online scam centres. We'll look at how these operations converge with other types of organised crime, including human trafficking and cyber-related crimes. The online scam centre model is generating billions of dollars for criminals. It has become one of the world's biggest illicit industries, market leaders in cyber-enabled money laundering and underground banking, as well as fueling the illicit drug trade. These centres destroy the lives and livelihoods of scamming victims, as well as of the individuals trafficked into these centres for forced criminality. The illicit finance industry damages our economies, erodes social trust and democratic institutions, and international laws and norms. Australia is deeply concerned about the continued growth of these centres in and beyond Southeast Asia, given the success of the model and their increased convergence with transnational and serious organised crime. Domestically, Australia's National Anti-Scam Centre is working together with government, industry, other regulators, law enforcement bodies and community organisations to make it more difficult to scam Australians. Our Scams Prevention Framework, legislated in February this year, will establish world-leading consumer protections against scams. It will create new obligations for businesses in sectors targeted by scammers, with specific obligations set out in mandatory codes. But domestic measures are not enough. Disrupting and dismantling these scam centres requires a complex and coordinated response, including by international enforcement and regulation agencies. Australia has been working closely with our regional and global partners to share intelligence, identify and disrupt cyber scam syndicates, and protect scam victims in Australia and around the world, including through the Mekong Australia Partnership on Transnational Crime and the ASEAN Australia Counter-Trafficking Program. As co-chairs of the Bali process on people smuggling, trafficking in persons and related transnational crime, Australia and Indonesia are re-energising the region to build capacity to combat these online scam centres. We really hope that today's session can help advance practical and operational international cooperation on combating online scam centres, organised fraud and trafficking. And I very much look forward to our discussion. So thank you again, Mark.
Thank you, Katie. That's an excellent overview of Australia's response. Without any further ado, I'll hand over to Lindsay Kennedy, who's a renowned journalist working in Southeast Asia. She's done a lot of work for us over the last number of years on the issue of scam centers and on research generally on illicit markets in Southeast Asia. Lindsay, over to you.
So good morning, I'm Lindsay Kennedy, and since 2021, I've worked with the GI-TOC to map, monitor and raise the alarm about the spread of the forced online criminality industry in Southeast Asia and beyond. This includes identifying scam compounds and networks of criminal actors behind them, identifying hubs as they grow or relocate, tracing where and how workers are recruited, following where stolen money goes and how it gets there, and demonstrating how this industry forms a crucial component in a multi-billion-dollar transnational business empire that spans both criminal and now mainstream economies. Next slide, please. So you may have heard terms like romance scams, investment scams, or pig butchering. We use the term forced online criminality because it covers all kinds of online fraud, predatory illegal gambling, and forced online sex work. The unifying factor is the scam compound model, with operations based in secured buildings, purpose-built or sometimes adapted from casinos, hotels, homes, or apartment buildings, with offices and dormitories on site. So often workers are duped and trafficked, but even if they did know what the job would entail, they typically can't leave once they arrive and are exposed to varying degrees of violence and control. So here you can see a map of where forced online criminality compounds have been reported or raided. This is not a full list. New ones pop up and shut down all the time. And although this is now global, Southeast Asia remains the epicenter. Here and the Middle East is where you find the biggest, best protected, most brazen compounds, and where trafficking, torture, and exploitation are most rampant. Next slide, please. The forced online criminality industry hurts regions differently depending on whether they are the hosts, targets, or third countries used to launder or invest the profits. So areas marked on here in grey are major targets for traffickers who are sourcing labour. They prey on instability and conflict. They often target university graduates in areas with high unemployment, and that makes victims even harder to detect because they don't fit our typical trafficking profiles. The areas in red are where most fraud victims are located. So high-income countries are often typically prime targets, but countries like China, India, Thailand, and Kenya straddle both because their citizens are often recruited specifically to target their compatriots. And the economic damage of this is huge. The Global Anti-Scam Alliance estimated that just last year, consumers lost $1 trillion to scams. That's $1 trillion of capital flight flowing out of illicit economies and into the hands of criminal organizations. And the yellow circles here show where the main scam compounds are located. So as well as horrific abuse, assault, sometimes murders, this is where you have rapid growth and entrenchment of criminal groups in country and the security threats that come with that. Typically, these OCGs are part of larger groups, or they work closely with other overseas organized crime groups. They also bring an increase in other trafficking flows like guns, drugs, illicit wildlife. In some countries, these criminal industries now dwarf the legal economy. And even when a compound is shuttered or people are rescued, this creates an enormous financial burden for the countries and criminal justice systems responsible for processing, repatriating, and rehabilitating survivors, and distinguishing between who are victims and who are perpetrators. As you can see on the map, it's not only host or source countries that get stuck with that task. Third countries like Thailand have to take on tens of thousands of rescuees, escapees, or arrestees who are transiting from neighboring countries where scams are rife. And those stolen billions or possibly even trillions of dollars need to be laundered. That means channeling dirty money through the economies or banking systems of third countries and buying up property or opening businesses in high-income countries that often is where they stole the money from in the first place, exploiting crypto-friendly hotspots in Eastern Europe and the Pacific Islands, or using this to fund new urban developments that then become the next scam compound hotspots. So no matter where in the world these scam compounds are located, nowhere is immune from the harms of criminal exposure. Next slide, please. So broadly speaking, there are three types of criminal actors who are directly involved. First, you have transnational criminal groups who may be involved in the development of these scam compound sites, the purpose-designed special economic zones or satellite cities, or they might just sublet space inside them to run their operations. And then you have criminally exposed investors. These typically own the real estate itself, and they may lease space inside to scam companies. So the most notorious of these investors often have criminal histories in China or Southeast Asia, usually for illegal gambling or money laundering charges, and they buy foreign passports to avoid deportation. And third, you have corrupt local partners. So these are essential for anyone to operate at scale. They might be politicians, they might be military generals, they might be other influential figures who have a stake in the compound or who take a cut in order to greenlight construction. And trafficking survivors tell us all the time that local police, wherever they are often paid to provide security to these compounds. They'll sometimes even transport and traffic victims and bring people back if they manage to escape. Next slide, please. And then at the next layer, which we don't talk about as often, are the enablers. So that includes infrastructure providers, so a broader network of sometimes construction contractors or state-owned enterprises, real estate developers, and so on. These are people who bid for lucrative contracts to build the physical buildings and the road and transport infrastructure, or maybe even set up access to utilities and telecoms. Some of these are quite clearly complicit right from the outset. Others seem unaware of the criminal aspect until it's too late for them to back out. And then crucially, you have financial services and fintech providers. These are apps, payment systems, even sometimes whole banks that are set up by criminal actors to be a guaranteed means to launder their money. Users may change money between currencies or convert from cryptocurrency. Sometimes they even have their own native coins, and most of them offer a bridge into the illicit economy by connecting to other providers. Some of these are designed exclusively for internal use inside a scam compound or a scam hub. Others are publicly available and marketed externally to other criminal actors, offering high levels of secrecy and minimal KYC measures. Next slide, please. So there are many, many reasons why we should be very concerned about this. From a financial, security, and human rights perspective, this industry is wreaking spectacular damage to host nations, workers' home countries, and countries targeted for fraud. And it's also sending this message to citizens that their governments can't protect them. The groups behind this are getting more and more powerful and better connected. They're undermining the authority of their own countries, and they're sometimes even co-opting governments and officials. We're seeing a convergence of crime types. We're seeing transnational crime groups expanding their footprints into new territories. We're seeing an extraordinary concentration of wealth in the hands of dangerous criminal groups, including in countries targeted by scams, which is making these actors even harder to dislodge. We're seeing this model used to make money for sanctioned individuals in states like North Korea. Dangerous entities now have income streams and also willing partners to help collect them. And this is not slowing down. Scam compounds are raided or displaced sometimes, but they only reopen or move elsewhere. And it's only going to get worse as more people flee war, poverty, unemployment, and climate disaster. Plus, improvements in AI make recruitment and scamming more effective and scalable. Next slide, please. So what can we actually do to stop all of this? This is a huge, complex, well-organized, collaborative, adaptive, transnational industry. But all the responses currently tend to focus on just one piece of the puzzle. That doesn't work. This is a comprehensive organized crime phenomenon, and we have to respond accordingly. It's not enough to ask police in one country to crack down on a single compound and arrest a few hundred low-level workers. It's not enough to cut power to a scam hub, which just deprives locals of while compounds are able to switch to generators. We need to be targeting senior operators with high-level arrests, disrupting international networks, conducting simultaneous shutdowns so operations can't just move elsewhere. It's not enough to criminalize survivors who should be key sources of intelligence and witnesses to build a case against those at the top. These victims deserve better. And without help to exit the industry and stay out of the industry, we're gifting those criminals with hundreds of thousands of weapons to use against us. It's not enough to have CSOs or private companies, police, governments all struggle to fight this separately using siloed information. Transnational crime groups collaborate, and we have to do the same. We need to be sharing information across sectors and borders. We need to engage the private sector and CSOs. We need to piece together these sources to run better investigations, disrupt business models, improve KYC, identify red flags early on, and make partners and enablers accountable. The bottom line is this: reactive measures are doomed to fail. We need to be proactive in preventing these criminal networks from gaining ground, spreading into even more jurisdictions. And for that, we will need a holistic, collaborative, and truly transnational response. Last slide, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lindsay. That's an excellent overview to begin our discussion. We have 3 additional speakers. In fact, I should have introduced the panel before Lindsay started. Lindsay's given an overview, and we have, if you like, 3 member state responses, beginning with Australia. Tyson Pickavance, who's a cyber liaison officer in London for the Australian Federal Police, followed by Dan Joshua Valenton, who's a cybercrime investigator, Dan for the Philippines Cybercrime Investigation and Coordination Center. And then Fran Dowling is the Deputy Director, but head of the Fraud Policy Unit, who will provide inputs around the UK's policy response and also the UK's global initiative around the issue. Tyson, I'll hand over to you immediately, and we'll go through the 3 speakers, and then hopefully we will have time for questions. So over to you.
Thank you, everybody. We've heard so far a lot about the need for collaboration and how we can't just fight this in a siloed way. And hopefully what I'm about to explain is the Australian Federal Police's and Australian law enforcement's response in that collaborative way with our international partners. Next slide, thank you. And the next one again. So what we have with the Australian Federal Police is what we call Operation Firestorm. Now, Operation Firestorm has a very simple but very large mission, and that's to investigate, disrupt and degrade the infrastructure of organised crime using scam call centres targeting Australia for cyber-enabled fraud. Next slide, thank you. So Operation Firestorm began in August 2024, so it's still quite a new concept, and it's still very much in its infancy. It lives in the Joint Policing Cybercrime Coordination Centre, which is based in our office in Sydney in Australia. Now, the JPC3 brings together all law enforcement agencies from Australia. It brings together all of our major banks. It brings together agencies such as the National Anti-Scam Centre, our financial regulator AUSTRAC, and a number of other government bodies. So what we have in the JPC3 is all those tools and all those agencies in one place to go forward with that collaborative response that we've been speaking about. Sorry, I lost my spot there. And the intent of having all those agencies together in Operation Firestorm is to be able to have an effect internationally once we've gathered that data domestically. Am I going to the next slide? Thank you. So why scam call centres? There's lots of different fraud going on in the world. There's lots of different things that are impacting Australia from overseas. Why scam call centres? We've heard some information so far from the other speakers about some of the damage that it's doing internationally. But from an Australian perspective, if I can highlight that in 2023, there were 601,000 reported scam victims in Australia. And earlier we heard Lindsay say that last year there was $1 trillion in economic damage. For Australia in 2023, it was estimated to be 2.74 billion, which for a country as sort of small as us on the national scale, that is quite a big volume. So what we see is a very large economic impact. We also see, due to scams being so high volume, we see a large amount of individual victims. And whilst some of those victims may only be suffering what might be seen as a small monetary loss, the impact of that loss or the impact of the embarrassment of falling victim to a scam is that flow-on effect and that flow-on victim sort of degradation that needs to be quantified as well. As we've also heard pointed out so far today, it's not just the scam itself, which is a target for the AFP's operations. We've heard that people get trafficked into these environments to conduct the scams or to act as servants for the people conducting the scams. Certainly some of the operations we've run, we've seen that people have been trafficked into these scam rooms as prostitutes for the workers there themselves. So it's not just the people that are there working, it's also the ancillary offending and the ancillary people involved in that space that it impacts. So going after scam centres themselves not just stops the scam, it also stops the ripple effect of the other types of offending, the other types of victimisation that we're seeing. Next slide, please. Mindful of time, so I won't go through too many details on this. So the overarching strategy of Operation Firestorm is that domestically we'll use all of our partners that we've got that I've mentioned earlier to gather intelligence, to identify trends, to then share that information with our foreign law enforcement partners, mostly in Southeast Asia, but everywhere else, to help identify where those scam centres are. And then once they're identified, we also offer operational assistance in taking down those scam centres. That may be in the form of deploying our members overseas with you or with them to effect the arrests and the deportations. It may also be technical assistance after the fact. So that we'll see in the case study very shortly, there are a large number of devices and things that are found, and we're helping our partners in that space to go through that evidence and triage that information. Next slide, thank you. That says a lot of what I've just said there. So next slide, thank you. Next slide, thank you. You can tell I wrote this one. So this is the important part for this presentation here. This is a case study of how this actually works in practicality for Australian law enforcement and our partners in Southeast Asia. So under Operation Firestorm, we assisted in a takedown of a scam centre in Manila. Next slide, thank you. So October 2024, so very early in the Op Firestorm timeline, we deployed members to Manila in the Philippines to assist the Philippines Anti-Organised Crime Commission and the National Bureau of Investigation in disruption of a scam centre. What we found, and there'll be a slide in there a second, which you'll see when we went through the door, was hundreds of computers, thousands of devices, and hundreds of people present in the centre. So the idea here that as an international collaborative, we can't do this alone, and that the sheer volume of that just necessitates that we can't rely on any one country to tackle these sort of overt actions themselves. So During the overt activity, what we found was a spreadsheet on one computer that had 5,000 Australian WhatsApp contacts, which were likely the targets of Operation Firestorm. So one computer, 5,000 contacts, multiply that by hundreds of computers, thousands of devices, and you're starting to see sort of the sheer volume of people that they're targeting if not successful with. Next slide, thank you. So there's a quick photo. So there's the devices, there's the phones, there's the SIM cards. It's a very professional setup. It's a very elaborate setup. It's not something that's happening in 1 or 2 rooms in a backyard. It is happening in warehouses and factories and buildings, and it is at an industrial enterprise scale. Next slide, thank you. So I spoke about the after action assistance that we offer. So what we found in reviewing the devices was they were targeting dating sites. They were targeting Australians and posing either as Filipinos working remotely or Filipinos working domestically. They're engaged for 7 days or less. And the purpose was to encourage the victim to invest in cryptocurrency. And what they would then do is they would then social engineer that person to transfer that cryptocurrency into the scammer's wallet. So you're having the victim conduct all of the money laundering for them. And it's obviously, it's a low bar to entry there. So if the people that are conducting the scams are getting the victims to conduct the actual activity, the need for highly skilled scammers is getting less and less. Next slide, thank you. They had scripts, I won't go through this, mindful of time, but they had scripts that they designed for their workers to go through. So again, the bar to entry for their workers is very low. It's all designed that you can do this at scale. Next slide, thank you. Now, this is a very confusing slide because there's no context to it, but this is essentially a web that was designed out of all the links that was found out of this investigation. So very quickly, there's 4 Australian phone numbers in this investigation. One of these phone numbers was linked to a crypto wallet. This crypto wallet, my notes, was found to have moved $51 million in cryptocurrency throughout its life. So that wasn't all linked to this one scam. That wasn't all linked to this one scam center, but $51 million moved through this wallet that was linked to this one. So when we talk about fighting that upstream and finding things beyond just this one call center, that's what law enforcement's doing. The identification of wallets and links between scam centers allows us to then try and find those higher level targets and disrupt the syndicate and disrupt the system at a higher level. Next slide, thank you. That's all from me. Thank you for that.
Awesome. Thank you very much. That fits well with Lindsay's presentation. It provides detail of a single investigation and center, plus some very good policy options for our discussion. Dan, I'll hand over to you to talk about the response in the Philippines from your perspective.
Yeah. Good morning. Distinguished delegates, colleagues, I am honored to share our national experience in responding to cyber scams, a critical and evolving threat that impact lives, economies, and trust in digital systems. So this presentation focuses on our national experience, our insights and policy reflections from the ground. Next slide, please. So let me start with a quick overview of the situation on the ground. So $8.1 billion, nearly 2% of our GDP, that's estimated cost of cyber scams in the Philippines. And it's not just numbers. Behind every figure is a victim, a family, a shattered sense of trust. The Philippines is one of the most connected countries in the world, and we have nearly 98 million people online. That's about 84% of our population, with an average of 8 to 9 hours of screen time daily. Unfortunately, this engagement also makes us a prime target. Most scams come through simple channels such as social media, text messages, social media, and phone calls. Digital wallets and bank transfers are the usual payment methods, but what may look basic on the surface can be powered by highly organized, large-scale operations behind the scenes. Some run like syndicates, some even mimicking call centers. Next slide, please. So what does this look like in reality? So just to give us sort of context of what has happened. from the previous years. The POGO operation, over 100,000 unregistered SIMs seized. We've conducted several major operations against syndicates running as fake offshore gaming companies. We call them POGOs. So in one raid, we found out not just offices, but entire compound, a 10-hectare property with 36 structures. So it's a very big perimeter of fraudsters with villas, tunnels, and facilities to train workers on how to scam people. And as we can see here, some scams focus on romance, trafficking, cryptocurrency, and investment scams, among others. Next slide, please. So the government response wasn't just technical, it was political, strategic, and urgent. In 2024, our president made a bold move, ban all POGOs immediately. This wasn't just policy. It was a high-level declaration reflecting the government's firm stance that online crime syndicate hiding behind legal facades will be dismantled, not negotiated with. That these so-called POGOs were becoming breeding grounds for scams, human trafficking, and transnational crimes. And we backed it with action. Next slide, please. We knew we had to move fast and act decisively. So over the past few years, we passed key laws. Next slide. These are just some of the photos of actual operations. All right. And we passed key laws like the Anti-Financial Account Scamming Act of 2024, the SIM Registration Act, one of the most strongest efforts to that tackles online fraud and scams across the country. And we have a lot of mechanisms already in place, but law alone doesn't stop online fraud and other cybercrimes. That's why we've embraced a whole of government approach and whole of society approach, not out of obligation, but because simply it works better. It's more responsive, it's more inclusive, and ultimately more effective. As we can see here, we have interagency collaboration, government-to-government partnerships, foreign partners with private sectors, fintechs, and we have a project that goes down the grassroots community in the Philippines. Next slide, please. So we've brought together agencies from the Cybercrime Investigation and Coordinating Center, almost the same as the Australian Cybercrime Office as well, that we've used the several government agencies so in one office so that we can easily coordinate, aligning our intelligence, operations, and rapid response. So we have worked hand in hand with tech platforms, fintech providers, and civil society because every partner brings something valuable to the table. Next, please. And through Project Equity, we have extended our reach to communities, not just to raise awareness, but to empower people to protect themselves and others. It's not just because we believe in our approach, it's not just the government pushing forward, it's the community and the sectors moving in sync and moving together. And that collective effort is what turns policy into real world protection. And next slide, despite these efforts, we continue, however, face gaps, real challenges in terms of our legal, operational, and institutional. First, the legal landscape is still playing catching up. Scammers have moved beyond traditional methods. The OTT messaging scams are still under gray zones due to evolving tactics. It may not be covered by our current regulatory framework. There are also issues when it comes to cross-border jurisdictional issues, which complicate the enforcement and prosecution of scams. Also, third, the institutional coordination and capability still face critical gaps. While interagency efforts have improved, overlapping mandates and fragmented systems sometimes create delays and confusions, leading to coordination challenges. And at the operational level, still many frontline officers, first responders, and local units lack the specialized trainings and digital tools need to investigate, analyze, and respond effectively to cyber frauds. So with these challenges, we've seen the scale of the problem, but we have learned a lot from confronting it head on. Next slide, please. So how do we move forward? We have to, for legal and policy pillar, we have to continuously update and refine legal framework to cover new technologies. Of course, cybercrime evolves fast, and so must our laws. Secondly, we need to strengthen cross-border cooperation mechanisms because cybercrime and fraud knows no borders, and neither should our response. Third is we need to invest in advanced forensic and attribution capabilities to address operational challenges. Modern scammers use modern tools. That's why our governments, our partners must prioritize investing in infrastructure, fraud detection management systems, as well as threat analytics platform. And lastly, we must deepen multi-stakeholder partnerships and cooperation by establishing structured real-time collaboration mechanisms. We can move from siloed responses and shared defense systems. Cyber resilience isn't built in policy rooms alone. It is built in barangays, classrooms, community responders, and to individual. Because when we invest in systems, we empower people and foster collaboration. We move beyond response. We build a digital environment that is secure, inclusive, and prepared for what's next. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Not only what you're doing, but some of the challenges and issues that that we may face in future and the policy responses. Thank you again. Fran, I'll hand directly to you.
Thank you. And it's been fascinating listening to the experiences of colleagues and what they're working on. I have the privilege of leading on UK fraud policy, and I certainly agree with many of the messages that we've heard so far about the need to evolve and move forward across a range of things. If I could go to my slides, please. Brilliant. If I could have the next slide, please. Thanks. So just to reiterate, in the UK, what's been fascinating is as we've been getting better and better data on the fraud, the problem is becoming clearer and clearer. So 43% of all crime in the UK is now fraud, and that is driving up overall fraud, overall crime metrics in the UK. So if we want to tackle crime, we have to tackle fraud. Similarly, it's predominantly online, with 80% of fraud in the UK having a cyber element, and 2 in 3 adults are being targeted by online fraud. So I think that's where we're seeing the volume shift as we're moving, fraud is moving online. Transnational, so we're being affected by the same scam centers that everybody else is. It really is an international fraud movement, which is targeting all of us. Next slide, please. Totally agree around the links we're finding in the UK between the groups that are getting involved in fraud and the fact that there's such strong organised crime links. It's making a lot of money. So many groups with nefarious aims across a range of national security threats are making sure that have got skin in the teeth of the fraud game and are making a lot of money from it. Interestingly, the real damage to our economy is becoming more and more apparent. So this slide suggests that the economic cost of fraud to the UK is about 6.8 billion. I can tell you, although the figures haven't been released, that every time we run the figures and have a look at some of the other impacts, that figure changes considerably. So the next lot of publicly available figures will be considerably higher. This is a major impact on the UK economy. And it's also one that is growing. So fraud went up by 33% in the last year. And that is with a comprehensive fraud strategy in place, numerous measures that we're working on, which undoubtedly are having an impact, but just goes to show how bad it would be were we not working on the problem. I can go on again, please, to the next slide. And the next slide. Great. So what are we doing about it? So we did have a fraud strategy back in 2023, which involved a lot of investment from the government and targeted a range of areas. We need to go further. So we are now looking to publish an expanded fraud strategy by the end of the year that focuses on 7 key areas, some of which are new to us and have required quite a step change in our approach. So the first one, around improving data sharing, might sound quite dull, but might be one of the most impactful ones that we've got. That is a really key initiative that's looking at private sector data across the banking, tech and telco industries, and public data that we have from law enforcement. And we're looking at sharing that data on a real-time basis so that we can move faster and respond faster. The second pillar is one that I think we're all trying to negotiate, which is around how we work better and collaborate more with the tech and telco sectors, because it's clear when we're looking at the online threat that we're facing and the way that individuals are getting millions of attempts at fraudulent contact every year, that we have to do more to block the frauds before they're hitting our citizens. So that will be a key pillar of our approach. Absolutely. The third one is around international cooperation. We're all facing this challenge together, and actually with shared understanding and learning from each other. So I'm picking up points as this presentation has been going on. We can have a greater impact on what we're seeing facing us. The fourth one is around business and growth, and I can't stress this enough. There is a huge amount of underreporting that we're finding that's going on, where businesses are not prepared to reveal, reputationally or to damage consumer confidence about the attacks that they're facing, and it is having an impact on investment. It's having an impact on businesses' willingness to spend money. It's having an impact on consumers who don't know which businesses to trust. So that is a key issue that we're facing. Another pillar is around public awareness and victim support. And that's interesting too, around the education piece. It has to evolve continually, but we have a big program in the UK called Stop, Think, Fraud, where we really consider and try and get ahead of some of the scams and share kind of advice with victims. It's also very clear that everybody can be a victim, and some of the approaches that we've taken in the past in the UK are not appropriate. They've implied that you should have done more to protect yourselves as a victim, and it's quite clear from the presentations that we have that this is incredibly clever, agile business models that we're facing, and so that's part of that. The threat is evolving, and that's really critical too. If this is what we're seeing now, and we know that the business model that we're looking at on the fraud side, what is this going to look like 3, 5, 10 years down the line? And it could have a real impact on our economic security and business environment. And then the final one around criminal justice outcomes, really important that we get ahead of those. So if I could move on to the next slide, please. Online fraud, and that one, perfect. So I've hinted and highlighted a little bit around why online fraud is so important. And there have been 2 approaches that we've taken in the UK. One is around voluntary agreements and charters, and the other is around legislation and regulation. And we found that we do need a combination of both in order to move swiftly on this. If I could have the next slide, please. This is around our voluntary approach, and you'll see at the bottom the number of organisations that are part of our charter and have agreed to look at, filtering out and removing frauds and collaborating with us and raising awareness. So this has been really, I think, well attended, well joined. We've had lots of interest from the private sector in being part of a kind of clear approach, and it's something that we really feel that we should be sharing internationally so that businesses have the same framework for each country. If I could move on to the next slide, please. And we also have a very powerful tool in the Online Safety Act, which we have introduced. And there are two main duties here, one of which came into force in March, so a couple of months ago. And this is around insisting on having proactive systems and processes in place to detect user-generated fraud, and also faster reactive action on fraudulent content and users. So these are in law and really important. And then we're also doing stuff on the fraudulent advertising side. But I'll be really open as well, which is that we may well need to move faster. So the scale of the problem is quite clear, and the government support for us doing something about this is also clear. If I can move on to the next slide, please. So, what does this mean, some of our regulation? Does it really have teeth? Absolutely. Companies are required to comply. And the big teeth bit is if, and we're talking here around sort of tech and digital side of the world, if they fail to comply, our Ofcom have the power to fine them the higher of 18 million or 10% of their global turnover. So it really does have teeth, and we're really serious about blocking some of the fraud before it hits our users, because this can not only be a government response to the problem that we're seeing, this really needs to be a private, public sector and international response. If I can have the next slide, please. And next slide, great. So finally, international collaboration, why we're here. So we've mentioned the Global Fraud Summit that the UNODC and Interpol are hosting next year in March. That gives us, we're very pleased to be supporting that as the UK. That gives us a real opportunity to work on lots of these shared collaborative initiatives internationally, and to come back in March next year, not to have another discussion forum about it, but to really demonstrate what we've been able to do collaboratively in international. And that includes increasing global law enforcement collaboration. It includes, more joint law enforcement operations. It includes improvements in our data sharing so that we're able to share more intelligence about what we're seeing, and so we're better able to target things. So, and also we would like to look at the blocking fraud part that I've spoken about. So really pushing for enhanced global standards to detect and block fraud through collective international engagement. And we really think that this is something that will have a big impact. So I think that's my final slide. So I'll hand back to you, Mark, but thank you for your time.
We've had really excellent presentations that have covered a lot of ground, and just to highlight the extraordinary harm actually that we are talking about. To mention, we, as you may know, run the Global Organized Crime Index. That's a 2-yearly measure of 15 criminal markets. Fraud is now on top, and that's driven by, I think, the cyber phenomenon, and it highlights that there's no country that is not touched by this issue. We've covered issues around laws, Online Safety Act, enforcement, our two law enforcement officers, and the challenges that you face. I was struck, Tyson, by the number of devices, the amount of time that must take, cooperation with the private sector, some of the challenges that we've talked about, Lindsay, cooperation with civil society, the role of civil society and community actors, the issue of prevention and blocking. There just seems a huge number of issues here worthy of discussion. Fran mentioned one which I think is very important on criminal markets when the response begins to evolve, and that's the narrative around victims. There was a similar discussion around human trafficking, how we talk about victims, that we don't re-victimize people, call them stupid, etc. Many people don't want to report. And so this changing narrative about how we respond to people who have been scammed, to bring them along as allies in the process. I'll open up for questions, raising all those issues, and let's see, we have exactly 10 minutes, we're on time. If we can get through a couple of issues that people may want to raise, and then we will close on time. Questions, anybody? Thank you, sir. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning. My name is Vipon. I'm a public prosecutor from Thailand, working at the prosecutor office, which serves as the central authority for international cooperation on criminal matters. So what I want to learn a little bit more is from the experience between Australia and the Philippines. From your operation, it seems that you have direct cooperation without having to go through the diplomatic channel and central authority, which is really time consuming. So, but however, at certain stage, then you have to involve the official channel of cooperation, then it's gonna be lengthy. But I'm wondering if you have find any solution to overcome the time consuming of the so-called MLAT.
Thanks. So don't answer yet, Tassin. Let's gather a couple, because I think we have time only for one round and then one round of responses. Thank you for the excellent question from our Thai colleague. Anybody else?
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for those excellent presentations from all of you. My name is Anders Franson from the UNODC Civil Society Unit. I noticed that many of you mentioned the importance of public-private partnership in tackling some of these fraud centers and scam centers. Can you maybe share with us a couple more thoughts on how those partnerships can be promoted, and if at all the UNODC can play a role in that and support you in that effort? Thanks.
Thank you, Anders. Much appreciated. Any other questions or issues or inputs? Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Siri. I'm with the Global Initiative as well. And also, I think all of the panelists mentioned the community responses to the crime. So I would like to ask if you have identified in your country any successful community-led responses that you can share with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Surya. Much appreciated. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. What we'll do is, because there's a diversity of questions, we'll start with you, Tassin, if you don't mind, and if everybody would answer issues that they want to pick up, and we'll go through the panel, and then we can move towards a close. Over to you.
Sure. Thank you. Very quickly, have we found a way around the slowness of MLATs? No, we have not. Unfortunately, we're bound by all the other organisations in that chain, but that's why we're working in Firestorm on that police-to-police basis to just get to the scam centre, to shut it down, to then allow those local agencies to find the evidence there on the ground. If that's second source or that's new information, that's fine, but we're putting the importance on getting there and shutting it down over getting through the official channels to get the information in an administrative way. Unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for that. The second question I'll touch on while I'm here was how do we promote that public-private partnership? And for us in Australia, it's about continuing to develop the trust. So we have the banks in our tent, we have other agencies in our tent, and each agency is slowly getting more comfortable with each other, sharing a little bit more information with each other, and that will just continue to hopefully grow and grow and grow. There are some legislative challenges there in terms of data retention and what we can and can't hold compared to what the private sector can and can't hold, which we can address as well. But from a law enforcement thing that we can influence, it's that ongoing trust. We get information from private, we don't use it improperly, we don't burn them, we give them information they might have not had otherwise, they use it properly and they don't burn us in return. And community-led responses, I'm sorry, I don't quite have an answer for that one.
Okay, for the first question, when it comes to operations, we haven't had MLAT as well. So we are working on the tips on local operations and coordination among agencies in the Philippines in cracking down the online scams. For the second question on the public and private partnership, so our agency is partnered with different fintech platforms, payment intermediaries, as well as civil society organization like the Scam Watch, which is also affiliated with Gaza, if I'm not mistaken. We have a lot of partnership when it comes to information sharing and raising awareness because we believe that even though we are starting, our agency has started started operating in 2020. We are trying to leverage on the networks of existing agencies as well as private partners in awareness part. So for the third is on community-based partnership or response. We don't have the specific data as to that, but when it comes to increasing reports, because in the Philippines we are fragmented when it comes to our islands. We have 7,641 islands, and still many are unaware of the how to respond or to report online frauds. And by the time we've did our caravan across the Philippines, the reporting, the numbers of reports recorded in our agency has increased tremendously. So I believe with that, having the awareness in the community level, having them understand what the law in a layman's term, because our laws are drafted in English, and we have several dialects and languages in the Philippines, which many people wouldn't understand if we try to allude into that. So yes, I believe our efforts when it comes to community awareness is working as to fight against cyber scams.
Thank you. I think if I start with the community response first, and there have been some really interesting operations in the UK which have taken that approach. So it's been based on the data that we get in, and we're working collaboratively with the banking sector and others. So one was around the Chinese community in London who were being targeted by a particular scam. So there was then a lot of work to sort of preemptively go in and warn, and that was having an impact. We've also had other ones around particular local scams that are happening, and that's involved law enforcement talking to local banks so that they know what to watch out for in terms of the vulnerable people coming in and taking out a lot of money, or others, suspicious transactions, and also jewelers and pawnbrokers. That's been really effective. So what's key there is around the data and getting the data in time for us to spot where a particular community is being targeted. And that leads me into the public-private partnership part, which is that pretty much all the areas that we're looking at in our new strategy have a key public-private angle, be it from the obvious around data sharing to things around the closer collaboration with the tech and the telcos, clearly. Also, though, through improving victim support and public awareness, we have worked with a number of private sector firms and banks on particular campaigns, and we get support from social media companies who have offered us free advertising space to use it. So lots of the elements there are key. So thank you.
So to start with, when it comes to community responses, if you're, I work and live in Cambodia primarily. Pretty much every single person who's been covering this since 2021 is now in prison, deported, or dead, right? So it's not really, and if you look at every country that has a really embedded scam industry, these are countries that have systematically dismantled things like the free press in their own country. It is almost impossible to report on this. Not only can you not report on this within the countries where it's happening, but they follow you wherever you go. So I've had a number of stories killed by editors in Australia over the last few years, for example, because the people that I'm reporting on now sue the newspapers there. I've had stories killed in the UK because they say the cost of paying a lawyer to just look over the article is not worth it. These people follow you wherever you go and they will shut you down. So you cannot expect community-led responses. That is not fair. It's not safe for us to be doing that. You need higher, it needs to be happening at a higher level, frankly. This is where the private element comes in. So one of the things that we've been doing is trying to work out all the different kinds of entities that are necessary for a scam compound to function, for example, right? All of the different suppliers, all the people involved in building it. And, you know, you have some, I mean, there's a broad range. You have some construction companies who clearly know exactly what they're doing because they build blueprints of scam compounds that are designed to have minimal exits, mass security on the outside, and a blackout floor where people can be tortured. It's normally second from the top floor where there's a luxury apartment for the scam compound owner. So if you're building that kind of thing, obviously, you know, you're building a scam compound. Those people need to be, like, these kind of organizations need to be accountable. But then there's a whole gray area in between of companies who don't have enough of an evidence base to turn down contracts or to back out of relationships, because it's a vicious circle. There's not enough information out there for them to say to a criminal organization, we feel that we can't work with you. So we're trying to help people spot those red flags, but also have a two-way data sharing situation. So, for example, airlines are a great example because they can see patterns in where people are flying to. They can spot particular red flags of indicators of human trafficking, and being able to share that information back and forward would be incredibly valuable. And we're not talking to, these people are not part of the conversation. So yeah, when we talk about working with the private sector, it's working with everyone who might be able to help you identify when a new scam compound is emerging. I mean, even things like food delivery apps can see when a new scam compound has been developed, because suddenly there is a huge demand for food deliveries to an area which used to be a tiny village, for example. So we need to start thinking much more broadly and creatively about who has the kind of data that can pinpoint where these places are and involve those people in the conversation.
Thank you, Lindsay. If that panel demonstrated anything, it's the level of harm, the rapidity of the evolution. Clearly things are being done, but we're not doing enough. And speaking from a civil society perspective, just how challenging and dangerous this business can be. Can we give a round of applause to the panel, who I think have done a great job outlining the scale of the problem, the responses and the challenges. And to close, Fran, I'll turn over to you. Thank you very much.
Well, I'll be very quick, actually. I think some of my reflections from this are around fears, actually, a little bit for the future, unless we get our act together. But we do have that opportunity. And I would also say that another thing that's striking me is that there are lots of opportunities here to increase costs for the scammers. There are lots of vulnerabilities that we are talking about and that, you know, Lindsay's just raised. I think we could do a lot effectively in the next year to massively increase the costs that they're facing, and therefore have a really good effect on reducing fraud. But we'll need to do that together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks also to Australia, and thank you, everybody.